seem to understand. I'm not locked in here with you. That's it! You're locked in here with me!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Welcome once again. We're cranking the knowledge up to 11 again today. Our first show of November. We are seeming to rocket right into the winter season. We've got a couple. I liked the idea of doing a Halloween show. It was a gas when I found the ancient show that I had done back in 2007 and sort of used the goofy intro to do that. And I thought, you know what? It really wasn't probably the kind of horror story that you were hoping for. There was no takeaway at the end. It was just scary stories. So what I've decided to do is put together a few instances of really scary, real world, horrible things that have happened in real estate, and then give you the lowdown on how to avoid it, how to move through your real estate life so that these things don't happen to you. Because that's what it's about, right? It's about walking away armed with more information instead of just sitting around a campfire telling ghost stories. So I kind of just gave you the sitting around a ghost story version on Friday. So today I figured I would give you the real, honest to gosh, down and dirty, horrible, ridiculously bad situations, and then try to figure out how do you walk that path but avoid the nasty stuff. Now, of course, today's show is sponsored by Audible.com. They have more than 180,000 audiobooks and spoken word audio products. You can get a free audiobook of your choice at www.audibletrial.com/rebel. That's www.audibletrial.com/rebel. And we do have a new book of the week, as we will every week, because it's not just a clever title. It is a book of the week. We'll have a new book of the week that we'll discuss a little bit later in the show. It's an awesome one, and it'll be a great way for you to take advantage of your free book that comes when you use www.audibletrial.com/rebel. And plus, it's a great way to support the show. So in other news, there's also the show's going to be showing up very soon in Google's audio service, the Google Play Music service. I got an email from them asking if I would like to submit my podcast, which I thought was interesting. So I went ahead and did that. So I checked on its status sometime over the weekend, and it said that it was being reviewed, but I imagine that means it'll probably be put up pretty soon. So for those of you who use the Google Play service, Google Play Music is what it's called, so I guess that means they're creating a podcast section, or maybe they already have, to be honest with you. I don't use Google Play. But it will be up and available for folks to listen via that tool. So between us adding TuneIn last week and now Google Play Music this week, I'm hoping to be able to reach out to as many folks as possible. So if that's a preferred way for you to consume the show, it either at the time you're hearing it right now or sometime before the end of this week, you should be able to access the show. So more good news in terms of how many folks we are getting in front of, and hopefully that'll be something that if you're interested, you can take advantage of. Real estate is a minefield of potential creepy things. You know, whenever you get human beings involved in a process, all the crazy junk that human beings get up to can oftentimes mushroom cloud into the real estate world. So I have gone out and scoured the internets for crazy real estate stories, and I thought it would be a good way to find some stories, have them described, and then settle on what would solve that problem for you? What would prevent this from happening to you? So the first one comes to me from wisebread.com. This is a set of stories that came out last year. And the first one is an interesting story. The story states that Don Turner's son purchased a foreclosed home in rural Tennessee and thought he was getting a great deal. After 3 years of living in the home, he and his family found out from neighbors that the home was considered unfit for human inhabitation by local health authorities because the former owner produced methamphetamines in the home. From there, the new homeowners were financially responsible for bringing their home up to code. Don now runs a site called methlabhomes.com to make sure this doesn't happen to other homeowners. So in addition to this sort of giving you a creepy story, there are a variety of ways to get around this kind of thing. And I know that in many states, this is already a disclosure thing. If a house was previously a meth lab, it has to be disclosed because there's a health risk. The chemicals that are used – this is not the voice of experience speaking, by the way. The chemicals used in creating meth are toxic, and they're horrible. And if they get into the walls of the property, the remediation costs can be ridiculous. So what you need to do in order to protect yourself from this is ask the question. You need to either as part of the offer or as part of the disclosure process, request any information relating to the production of any illegal substances on the property. Now, you need to not just remember remember how these tools work, right? Now, even though I may buy a hammer and on the show may tell you exactly how to use that hammer to drive a nail into wood, you want to realize that hammer has a ton of other uses, right? It can help you put a wedge under something to raise it off the ground. It can help you do demolition work, right? So a hammer has more uses than just driving a nail. This philosophy or this idea of protecting yourself from past illegal activities on the property is something you should write into a disclosure. Now, and again, these are questions you should ask. These are not dumb questions. Ask your real estate agent to show you in your state's law where it says what must be disclosed. You want to know what must be disclosed. Now, a standard disclosure packet that you would order in most states would often cover a lot of this. Sometimes the criminal stuff gets missed, but oftentimes just a call to the local police department is all that it's going to take. You may have to go down in person, but at least it's a good step to go through. That 20 minutes of your day can save you years and piles of cash in potential remediation. Or if you're willing to take on the remediation and you can get someone to tell you it's going to cost you $15,000 to do remediation on these things, well, then you expect to pay less than that amount, right? You expect to be able, if it's a $100,000 house, you expect to be able to deduct $80,000, $15,000 to do the work, $5,000 for your trouble, that kind of a thing. So and this is something that might not seem worth mentioning. I often find it's worth mentioning though. Always build in your time and trouble. If someone comes back to you, and I've had this happen in negotiations before, we discover something about a property and they say, well, it's going to cost X. It's going to cost $5,000 to do it, and we're not going to do it in escrow. We will give you the money to do it after the fact. Okay, that's great. We would like $7,500 credited to us. Well, wait, we just discovered it was $5,000. Yes, but you're asking me to take care of the problem. So that means I'm going to not have use of that part of the house for that period of time. I'm taking a risk that once the work is started, more problems are found. So your realtors are almost never going to do this for you. They're almost never going to jump in and say, well, now I need to ask for more, because they never seem to think so and think that they should. And I'll be honest, when I'm on the opposite side of that, when I'm representing a seller who's selling a home, I absolutely push back on that. If we say it's going to be $2,000 worth of work and they say they want $3,000, I absolutely push back on that, and I almost always win. I shouldn't. I shouldn't win that. But realtors are too focused on the end line. They're too focused on that check at the end of the process, so they don't often fight hard for their clients. So in some cases, if you don't have an agent who's going to do that for you, you have to do it for yourself. So make sure to do it with things like this. You're going to want to if there are no legal requirements and even if there aren't, I mean, you don't want to have the law on your side, but still have a house that produced meth and is now uninhabitable because of that, right? So what you want to do is get all the disclosures you possibly can. And for a lot of the things we're going to talk about in these next super creepy, horrible things, doing some basic inspections up front are going to prevent this. They're things that are not going to surprise you. Frankly, all the things we're going to talk about say to me that whoever the buyer was had a crappy real estate agent. Because the bottom line is this is stuff that should have easily been known. Now, a good example is locally here. There was a famous meth lab house in Gilroy, and everybody knew about that. All the realtors knew about that house. They knew that it went down. They knew the previous owners had been arrested, and there'd been a huge raid and all this other kind of stuff. So a local agent is likely going to have at least an inkling of the neighborhood, which should absolutely inspire them to check with the local police department to find out. Now, a friend of mine who has had these kinds of things happen before makes it a regular part of their process to do a quick call to the police department to find out about any crimes that have been committed at that address. And she does it on every property in Gilroy. And they just tell her over the phone. It's not even a big deal. So I'm not quite sure how that works, but it's absolutely something you should be able to find out, even if you do have to show up in person. All right. So as far as this is concerned, if you're not protected by law, and even if you are, you need to write into your contract that the buyer expects full disclosure based on the knowledge of any participants in the process relating to crimes or criminal activity that were committed on the property. Because there are some states where it's okay to not tell you someone was murdered in the house. There's all kinds of things. So this will solve that problem. Next. A man returns to his home in Miami. He discovers some unwelcome house guest. His home, which he had been renting from a friend for the previous 2 years and was listed in a short sale, was filled with a family of strangers. A scammy realtor moved the family in, changed the locks, and walked away with $3,600 in profit. So how do you protect yourself from this? The first thing is to establish a relationship with your neighbors. There's really nothing contractually you can do. This is a lifestyle thing. I know that whenever I move into a new place, even back when I rented, even when it was an apartment, I introduced myself to the folks on either side of me because I wanted them to know what was up. I gave them my phone number. I said, if there's ever a problem, give me a call if I'm not there, and just so that we're cool, right? Now, are you always going to find congenial neighbors? No. Sometimes they're going to blow you off and they're not going to care. But I'll tell you what, there will always be somebody that always likes to pay attention to what other people are doing. So if you discover the lady directly across from you seems to always be looking out her window, she's the lady you want to go and give your number to. She may chat you up more often than you like, but she is great to have for eyes and ears if you're not there. Now, this gentleman apparently was gone for a decent amount of time, and I make sure to tell my neighbors when I'm going to be out of town. If I'm going to be out of town for more than 2 or 3 days, my neighbors know it, and they have my phone number, and they know how to get in contact with me. So I realize this isn't a procedural during a real estate process thing, but the idea of creating at least a smaller community with the folks who live to either side of you and perhaps across from you is ridiculously smart. If they see a moving truck pulling up in front of your house and you've never talked to your neighbors, you're probably going to come home and find most of your stuff gone. If you've talked to your neighbors and a moving truck moves up or pulls up in front of your house, they're probably going to call you and ask you what's up with the moving truck, particularly if you've told them you're going to be out of town for the next 3 or 4 days. So it's the cheapest insurance you can get that can potentially save you not only from losing a lot of your stuff, but a huge amount of hardship and a huge amount of money. Next. I wonder how many of these we're going to go through. We may end up having to make this sort of a multi-show kind of thing. The next one is bizarre. It's a little funky. It's one I have never encountered in my life. But the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania ruled that home sellers do not have to disclose if the home was the site of a murder, which we mentioned earlier, but also of suicide or satanic ritual. The ruling came after a homeowner filed suit because her home was the site of a murder-suicide. Now, this happened in 2014. The prospective home buyers are advised to use the internet to find out if someone died in a new home. You might have to really dig into some GeoCities websites, according to this article, to find out something about satanic rituals. But I'll tell you what, it's really not even that complicated. Again, if these kinds of weird things have happened in this property, doing the normal crime check with your local police department is going to take care of this. I have a really hard time believing that anytime a satanic ritual was done at a house and anyone knew about it, the cops knew about it. So I would guess that for 95%, 99% of any weirdness like this that occurs, you're absolutely going to discover that by jumping through the hoops of doing sort of a criminal background check on the address. Now, before we move on, let's cover this week's book of the week. It's a great one. I think it's fantastic because what it does is serves as a great underpinning for your efforts in achieving your goals. Now, we've talked about this before. We did several shows on this, and I think this is a great way for you just to add another stone to what you're building in terms of creating the future for yourself you want. Now, as I've mentioned before, Audible is offering Real Estate Realities listeners a free audiobook, so this could be it, of your choice, and a free 30-day trial membership. You can go to audibletrial.com/rebel and choose from over 180,000 different audio programs. Download a title free and start listening immediately. It's just that easy. Go to audibletrial.com/rebel. That's audibletrial.com/rebel and get started today. And it's also a great way to show your support for the show. So what is this week's book of the week? The Millionaire Next Door, The Surprising Secrets of America's Rich. Now, that's actually a pretty corny title for me and a little bit something I might gloss by if it hadn't been for some of the recommendations of friends who had suggested this to me. It's basically a book where some guys went out and did an awful lot of research, and and I haven't finished the book yet. I'm just getting started on it myself. But you can find out what the most common traits are among these folks, and you'll be surprised. You know, it's not one of those deals where they're talking about billionaires. These are folks who have built their wealth over time. These can be folks, even if you're not interested in jumping into the real estate thing, the healthy habits, the healthy financial habits they're going to talk about in this book are really going to be helpful for you to give yourself the sort of monetary flexibility in life where you can retire when you need to retire, or you can turn some of that money around and go ahead and engage in some investments that maybe help you grow your money even faster. Now, what's great about this particular book is it falls into that whisper sync for voice thing we've talked about with last week's book, where if you're reading the digital version on your e-reader using a Kindle, if you read to page 30, when you go to listen to the Audible version, it's going to start at the same page. It's going to start where you left off. There might be a little overlap by a paragraph or two, but actually that works out great because it just sort of reminds you of where you were by going with something you've recently read. So it's a fantastic way to work out your reading time and really leverage the knowledge during your reading time, but also take advantage of those moments between things you're doing to continue reading the book, continue growing, and continue learning more stuff. So strongly recommended, The Millionaire Next Door, The Surprising Secrets of America's Rich. If you'd like to get your hands on it right now, head on over to audibletrial.com/rebel. That's audibletrial.com/rebel. Do a quick search on The Millionaire Next Door. Make sure to click on the Whisper Sync for Voice Ready version. I noticed there were two versions up there. One noticed the Whisper Sync and one did not. So just make sure to click on that one. And if you do decide to buy the ebook version or not the Audible version, what is it? The Kindle version, you actually get a discount. Once you've bought one, you get a discount on the other, which is also kind of handy. So feel free to take advantage of that. It's a great way to support the show. All right. So moving right along, we come across another story that's a little bit creepy. And this is, again, it's another one that it shouldn't have happened, frankly. This comes out of Pennsylvania again. A lady named Liz Spickle purchased her home. There was a disclaimer, and on it simply read, "We have seen a mouse." Now, after closing months later, Liz started noticing blue dust raining from the ceilings, and it turned out that the previous homeowner didn't just see one mouse, they saw an entire infestation. And after a small leak forced her to open up the ceilings, they found dead mice, skeletons, and more blue powder, and discovered that the blue powder was poison and the mice were there by the dozens. So this is absolutely one that could have been avoided. This, if you had a standard pest inspection, they absolutely would have caught this. I have yet to find a termite inspector who doesn't find a way to get into the ceiling space to at least take a look. And if they see any telltale signs, I don't care how many mice you have crawling around in the space above your ceiling, if there are that many mice up there, there's going to be evidence down below. That's the way mice work. Mice don't just live in the crawl space above your ceiling. They go through the house. They go through your walls. They come down and they want to get into your kitchen. They want to get all over the place. So this is one of those situations where paying for that home inspection up front before you finish purchasing the home during that disclosure process can truly save you months and hundreds of thousands of dollars, or not, maybe, well, depends on the scale of the problem, could potentially save you thousands of dollars worth of heartache. So we always need to remember that inspection, even if nothing happens, serves as an insurance policy for you. If you get a licensed pest inspector out there to do a pest inspection on your home and they say there aren't any, you absolutely can go back and have a conversation with them, particularly if you find, because remember, if you find dozens of mice in your upper crawl space, that probably means there are hundreds, since you're not likely to see all of them when you're up there. Next, a home inspection in Philadelphia. So many things in Pennsylvania. A home inspector found a 15-foot boa constrictor in the crawl space. Apparently, the snake had gotten loose years earlier, and the owner thought it was dead. The upside is if we combine this problem with the previous problem, you wouldn't have had any mice, because that sucker would have just eaten those things right up. So is there a way that you could have not found or saved yourself the trouble of the boa constrictor? No. Probably not. And someone would have gone up and inspected the crawl space, or down and inspected the crawl space, because that's what they do. So, yeah, if it was there when you bought the house, odds are an inspector probably would have found it. But I just liked the synchronicity between this one and the mouse one, because if you combine those two problems, you have half the problems that you did before. Next is a cautionary tale that is a little bit more complicated than the other ones, because it sounds like these folks tried to do the right thing, but it really didn't work out that way. Now, in this case, a home inspector went through Justin and Kate Traher's home, but he did miss some problems. The previous homeowner had supposedly installed and tested the sump pump in the basement, and it failed shortly after move-in, which ended up flooding the basement. Then the sunroom was filled with termites, costing the couple $2,000 in repairs. After the termites were eradicated, they discovered the sunroom was entirely covered in mold. There was no caulking around the windows to keep the moisture out. So what is up with that? These are all things that absolutely should have been caught by a good inspector, particularly since in the case of what I tend to do, I get a pest inspection and a home inspection, and I usually get a roof inspection too. So I get all of those things inspected as a normal part of the purchasing process, and there is no way that mold or termites would have been missed by the termite inspection or a good home inspection. So they had a home inspector come in and do the work, but here's one of the problems with home inspections. A home inspection is only as good as the home inspector. So in order for you to really make sure you're getting the right bang for the buck, to be honest, you need to worry a little bit less about how cheap the inspector is and more about how effective the inspector is. Now, I would hope that a real estate agent was involved in this. I've gone through several home inspectors over the course of my career. And, when you find a good one, you hold on to them like they're a bar of gold, because you know that they can save you and your clients from going through some really tough stuff. So I'm not real sure how a home inspector missed mold. Mold doesn't just pop up all of a sudden after someone buys a house. The sump pump thing could have happened. The sump pump could have failed after close of escrow, but that literally should have been the only feasible problem these folks faced after close of escrow. So it's not only important to make sure you get these things done, but it's important to have a professional on your side who knows who's good at doing it and has that person do it for you. So just something to keep in mind. Sometimes just checking that checkbox, home inspection, termite inspection, isn't enough. It's about how well you do it. So keep that in mind and make sure that you are, one thing I like to suggest, and I invite my buyers, is to be there for these inspections. And I always go to them. If I feel like the person who's doing the inspection isn't really doing a very thorough job, I will tend to stop the process right there. Now, I happen to use a service where I know the inspectors. So I rarely see a new face. And if I do, they're usually going along as a helper. They're going along as sort of on a probationary kind of thing where they're learning from the good guys on how to do this stuff. But anytime I see someone I don't know who's the guy responsible for the job, I'm going to chat him up and find out more about what he does and make sure he's looking in all the nooks and crannies. And if at any point I suspect something isn't getting done to the level it should, I'm going to go ahead and call the guy who's in charge, and I'm going to say, I think we maybe need to redo this. I don't have a lot of faith in that this was completed. Now, I've never had to do that with this company I'm with now. Company I was with previously, I could do that, and the person I dealt with who was the boss never had a problem saying, no problem, I will send a new person out and we will get it done. So don't feel like you're being unreasonable by insisting on a rigorous inspection. You're paying for this thing. You should get what you need, which is a tough assessment of the condition of the property. And the reality is, whoever this home inspector was should get slapped, because these are things that absolutely shouldn't have gotten missed. All right. So there's a few. There's a few more I think that we can cover. We might do another one of these shows, or maybe I'll do them once every couple of weeks, is just take real world examples of horrible things that have happened in the wide, wonderful reel of real estate and share them with you and see if we can't put together how, as a buyer, seller, investor, or real estate entrepreneur, you can save yourself from falling into these pitfalls. Now, again, if you'd like to get in contact with me, the best way to do that is going to be through the website. That's www.therebelbroker.com. Feel free to go there if you'd like to send me a message. You can click on Contact the Rebel Broker. You can also follow the Facebook page. You can head over to the Twitter feed. And those are great places where I share really good articles on real estate. I'm not going to take pictures of what I'm having for lunch and share it with you. I'm not going to model my favorite new slacks for you on my Twitter feed. It's not that kind of Twitter feed. It tends to be very focused on real estate stuff, so you can count on zero fluff. I might tweet the occasional thing just that's super interesting, but I promise that's as far as it'll go. I'm a little bit of a geek, so whenever a good tech thing comes up, I often like to tweet about that. But even that's usually real estate related, so you can count on at least everything having in some way a relation to real estate. And of course, however you consume the show, no matter what means that might be, please show a little support for the show and give it a thumbs up or stars or a review or a smiley face, whatever it is. And that way you can help me build the show and get it in front of more folks. Thanks again, everyone. Talk to you next time.